Hello, viewers, and welcome to the Team VVV podcast, our first Team VVV podcast of 2019, of course. And it's been some time since we've last done a podcast. This involves a regular chat about everything in the world of racing games and key issues which have come up in the world of motorsport racing and other related stuff we want to talk about. Of course, I'm joined today by Kevin.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about some of the sort of latest news, catch up, and in the coming podcasts we'll have guests on here and hopefully questions from those of you listening, and we'll gradually build it up as we have done in the past and make it a regular thing. The podcast will be taking place on a Tuesday, so if you have questions, we'll always take those questions on the lead up to the Tuesday, and then the new podcast will be up every Wednesday for you guys to listen to. But moving on then, I guess we should look at some of the latest racing news. We've had the Gran Tour. And of course, we've done our first team chat of the year on the Gran Tour, and you can have a little listen to that and see what our thoughts are on the game. Suffice to say, great potential, but a bit rubbish. But then looking at some of the other racing news that's out and about, we've got Monster Energy Supercross, the official video game, coming on our release schedule in the next few weeks. Well, next week, a couple of weeks, I think. We're going to be looking forward to covering a bit of that, and lots of news on the website. So catching up with a little bit of news on the website first, I guess we'll get started. Forza Horizon 4, there's been quite a bit of news around Forza Horizon 4 at the moment. Kevin, tell us a bit about it. We've got kicking off, you've got 7 million players now. What do we think of that news story? Do we think that's real, or do we think that's just the fact that players have received the game and turned it on once and they've recorded that as a player?
That's a good question, actually. I mean, we know that the game had already surpassed 2 million players just 1 week after its launch. So I'm not quite sure how they get to that player count number, because it doesn't seem that Forza to me has always been a game that hasn't had the numbers that, say, a Gran Turismo title would have. There's always quite far behind GT numbers, but these numbers suggest otherwise. So we're not quite sure how they get to those numbers, but apparently there was as many as 2 million just 1 week after launch. So assuming those numbers are correct, it's easy to believe that they would have hit 7 million all this time later. But impressive figures, no matter which way they sort of slice it, whether it is like one, different gamer tags with the same person, even, that's still an impressive figure, isn't it? 7 million people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that Forza Horizon 4 is a technical tour de force. It looks absolutely stunning, and it really does show the potential of the Xbox One X in various elements as well. Probably one of the first games to do so in terms of the level of excellence that they've pulled from it, and just amazing to look at. But we've also got the stuff to do with removing emotes, dance emotes. I didn't know there were any in there.
Yeah, apparently so. Just one of those features that we don't really concentrate on, because it sort of goes all over your head, doesn't it? Things like that. But for the younger audience, it certainly is something there to enjoy. And this all goes back to the Fortnite lawsuits, where these two particular dance emotes were being contested. So they've taken those out of Forza just as a preventative measure. As far as we know, Microsoft and Playground Games haven't actually had a lawsuit filed against them, but so it's just more of a preventative measure. Get those out of the game, before the sort of potential trouble hits, understandably. But yeah, Forza Horizon 4 has been an amazing title. It really has captured the sort of gaming public, even outside of racing gamers. It's a game that a lot of people that don't normally spend time with racing games can get on and have a good time with. So it's it's been incredible for the racing genre. But it's just interesting to see where they'll go for the next title. I feel that perhaps with Forza Horizon 4, they need to revolutionize the title now, because I feel that the formula's getting a little bit stale for me. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I think it needs more depth. I've always felt that about Forza Horizon, though. I mean, 2 and 3 were the same. Beautiful graphics, wonderful technical showcases, but they don't develop you as a driver. You can choose a car for your first race and pretty much go through the whole game without really doing anything. The races don't develop. The race environments don't develop. The crowds don't develop. You may as well be, in your first race as your last race, because the difficulty is just the same and the experience is the same. So I think there's potential, but they're not realizing that full potential. But then part of these developers is they want to save things for the future as well. So
yeah,
they don't want to use it all up. But either way, I think they've done what they wanted to do very well. I mean, it's just now looking to where they take it from here in terms of splitting off different players on different paths, and that'll be your average players going on their average path, and experienced players having the option to develop a whole new path for them. And I think that will add lots of experience.
I think they've done probably just enough playground games to bring out this product. They've added the season-based weather system along with the UK environment, which you don't see UK in games very often. So it's quite something. But from here on out, I'd like to see a sort of major revolution in the title. Could we see perhaps Japan the next iteration?
I think Japan is most likely. I think we've got to say that Japan is most likely. And what would Japan be like? Well, they would need to do the Midnight Mountain races. So you'd need the initial D's type mountains. You'd need some of the music that suited that region. You'd need the Tokyo Highway races, much like you're seeing in Gran Turismo as it happened, with lots of traffic. You'd need the racing through the streets of Akihabara and core Tokyo, all the lights. And I think if they could combine that with rain and weather, they could make it stunning in terms of the effects. And imagine lights on cars, because of course they have a lot of lights on their trucks and cars and effects like that, and it could, for a graphical showcase, especially if it's the beginning of a new gen, could be stunning, absolutely stunning. I mean, and again, the graphics alone, along with the additional mountain mode itself, would be enough to sell it. So I think that's where it's going. What would I like to see? Probably a bit more in the way of mud and deformable ground and using the environments more. That's what I would like to see. We're not really using these environments. You can drive along and in your Lamborghini and then just drive through a wall and over a field and it does nothing. May as well just be a bare bit of ground. Any objects may as well be invisible as to be there at present. And I'd like to see the environments used more and affect you more. Whereas at the moment, they're just eye candy to that extent. So I think what I would like to see and where it may go may take a few years. I think the next version doesn't need to move on in that way very much. But there's loads of potential. I mean, there's years of where they can go with this in terms of driving in this open world. And I think as long as they keep the focus on the driving, that's where they need to be, building up that vehicle roster. But technology wise, they're bang on it with the technology of playground games. And, I always look forward to their future products. There's always going to be something exciting from them in the future. And really, it's up to other game developers to take it to them. There's no reason why some of the other big publishers shouldn't be able to develop similar technology to an extent. And yes, an in-house game is always going to have better graphics than a third-party developer to an extent. But there's also a lot of elements here where they've just brought things together, and they're very organized. And I find that some of the best developments are very organized, and there's not a million bugs at launch.
They don't bite off more than they can chew. They get the basics right. They don't expand too early, too quickly. I guess they get the core package down, and it's technically sound, and it runs fantastically. It looks fantastic, and it just works.
Yeah. I mean, it's so in that sense, Forza Horizon, that's good news there. Moving on, sticking with the arcade theme, actually, we've got Xenon Racer. Which is coming in March as well. First trailer looked good.
Yes.
Second trailer looked shiny, but handling looked dodgy. And then we watched a stream. Handling does look a bit dodgy. Kevin, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a bit disappointing actually. Looking at the recent stream they did, the cars don't seem to handle. It doesn't have that flow to the handling that a good arcade racer has. It needs to be intuitive. You need to make the turns at a decent speed to get that sort of flow in nature of rounding these turns as quickly as possible, drifting round. There just doesn't seem to be a lot of that. It seems to be like almost like a Formula Fusion, if you remember back quite a while ago, where you would the back of the car would easily sort of step out and hit the barriers. There's a lot of barrier hitting going on. It doesn't seem very intuitive. It should be even for non-expert players to get on and kick some butt. And looking at the gameplay, it just seems that it just needs some fine tuning in the handling really to get that sort of fast-paced
it
action
actually
down.
looks a lot like the Grand Tour, actually. In terms of
It can't be as bad as that, I'm sure.
In terms of the handling, but we've not seen a player do a clean lap yet. We've not seen a player actually hit apexes and show how it's done. It seems that the handling, that means, is not intuitive.
Yes.
And I think that's certainly a concern on that. On to something I've been doing recently. I guess a mention of Gran Turismo. Obviously, we've had the new January car pack released, and I mentioned on the trailer some classic cars. We've got the special stage Route X, which for me is just a bore. It's just a long, drawn-out bore, and it's, I don't know what percentage of the Gran Turismo sport community that's aimed at, but it doesn't seem like the track they needed right now. I think the Gran Turismo community needed something a bit more challenging, that added a bit more meat to it. So certainly they've bought themselves time for another month, but I don't know. I was a bit disappointed with that. I know the community's been wanting Spa for a long time. It will come at some point, that there's no doubt, but they're saving that for a special occasion, clearly, and perhaps for the FIA races to come. And I'll be producing a separate video or report on my experience on Gran Turismo over the past month of playing it, starting from 0 to moving up to the S rank recently, which was nice. And I have noticed some very big differences in terms of the daily races and the FIA races. And that is, on the daily races, you see incredible lap times, in terms of the qualifying that you can't beat. And then on the FIA races, when people only have 10 or 15 minutes to qualify, they're not nearly as quick, so they're not consistent. And so I find I'm a better racer and do better in the FIA races than I do in the weekly daily races, which is a bit of a challenge. But I'm going to report on that separately. But suffice to say, Gran Turismo Sport is developing. It's fine. It's getting there. It's not the Gran Turismo 7 we wanted.
No.
But, there is more to it all the time. I'd say, actually, I kind of hoped for more by now in terms of the overall package. It's still not where I hoped it would be.
The tracks are lacking. It's like the Northern Isles Speedway, the very short oval, doesn't lend itself well to racing because of the nature of the cars. Often, that they give you, it's very bumpy, almost like bumper cars. It doesn't lend itself well to the professional racing scene that they're going after. And the same is true with this special stage Route 10. It's very much what I would class as a top speed track, a track that you would only use to find out the top speed of your car. It doesn't really lend itself to any good racing action. So although the tracks are limited in GT Sport, it's just a shame that they've included a few tracks that are not really good for racing. So that's why people are complaining. They want to Spa, they want to see the old classic tracks in there, which were much better in terms of sort of racing action. But it's an okay track if you want to test your top speed, like I say. But in terms of racing, it's not going to set any thing alight. It's just too bland, isn't it? It's massive long straights. I think they're like, what are they? The 12-kilometer long straights. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous, really. And you've got like these massive oval shaped. You got these banked corners. Sorry. Again, which it's all very bland, isn't it? Once you've hit your top speed early on, it's very much a case of hitting that rev limiter time and time again, and it's pretty much a bore fest, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's not what we wanted right now, but I guess some of the community just like to test top speeds. In that sense, it's a handy thing to have more than anything. But Gran Turismo coming along. Other news, actually. So what have we got out there? We've got Outrun was released on the Switch recently, which is nice. Have a bit of classic Outrun action. Love a bit of that. We've had the McLaren Shadow racing recently as well. In terms of esports is everything, and of course an esport driver beating a Formula One driver in a race, not the round. The Formula One driver actually won over the 3 races, but nobody's reporting that. But the sim racer beat him in a round. But either way, I do have a certain cynical side to me about this, and I guess it started many years ago when Jan Mardenborough was racing GT Academy, that the people who are getting somewhere, even Rudy Van Buren was a highly trained karting racer. He isn't just a sim racer.
Yeah.
a lot of these guys have plenty of karting and car experience. Oh no, they haven't done the 15 or 20 years experience that other people have, but they have plenty of experience understanding tire temperature and grip and that kind of stuff. And I think that's kind of, there's not a division between a pure sim racer and sim racer with relatively extensive driving experience in their own way.
Yeah.
But you have to understand when they call it, you know, I think Venzo the other day, it's like he's driven a few cars. What does that mean? What does that mean? What, he's had 500 hours of karting. He's had, you know, 50 grand worth of investment put into his karting career or something. You don't know that. It's not always clear. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe he just jumped in a car and immediately did amazingly well. So, I don't know. But
rather than lend your sim racing experience to the real world, it's probably more a case of the opposite is going on. They're lending their real world knowledge to the sim racing.
Yeah, I think there's not enough. The media's not clear enough on that. You know, it keeps saying to kids at home, "You can be this. You can be driving in the Race of Champions. You could be driving a car." Well, can you? I don't know. I mean, you know, Rudy Van Buren did karting for years, so he's a racing driver. You know, and to an extent, it's just the only reason why he stopped was because of funding, which is what stops a lot of racing drivers. So what's happening is they're getting somewhere in their racing career, they're running out of cash when it reaches a certain point, and they're turning to sim racing, and then now they're getting a jump back into racing again. So I think there needs to be more definition. I found that the GT Academy years ago was the sim racers weren't getting anywhere. It was the sim racers that had real racing experience that were getting somewhere, and it was almost disappointing to see at the time. But it meant they needed less training to actually perform. So, you know, I look at this, but I have a different eye to it in terms of what the news is reporting and the reality. But either way, well done to those who've done some sim racing and got somewhere, and they've obviously got incredible skill. And sim racers, I would love to see some pure sim racers given the opportunity to get somewhere there. So next up, we've got what have we got here? Ride 3 update. Any significant changes there?
No, it's just a couple of fixes for a couple of crashes, but there is apparently a new update coming towards the end of the month, which is said to be a lot bigger. So sort of stay tuned for that. But there was a recent Dirt Rally 2 trailer which showed the rallycross element.
In Dirt Rally, yeah, and it has, of course, the yellow filter back, doesn't it? The good old yellow filter that we enjoyed or not in Codemasters games years ago, and thought that we'd seen the last of. Sadly, it's back, and we've got this kind of unreal dreamscape. And I think what was the thing about Dirt Rally that people liked was it was a rally game that felt more realistic. And already we've gone from Dirt Rally to Dirt Rally Rallycross.
Yeah.
And we're not going for we've gone for dreamy, bloomy, you know, sort of dreamy vibe to it. It doesn't look real, doesn't look realistic in that way. We've seen that in the types of lighting they're using. It's not a realistic looking lighting at all. And I think when we first saw the sunset, I thought, well, let's give them a chance. Let's see how it develops. And as it's developed, it's looked less and less realistic. And so we'll see what the final game's like. But artistically, I don't like the direction I'm seeing in terms of the art lighting style myself. It doesn't look like real life. And I think Dirt Rally, really we should focus on the rally. I think Rallycross, for me, damages it really. The resource that's gone into Rallycross could have gone into making 4, 5 or 6 more rally stages that were even more detailed. And I think they need a really good rally game. You know, instead you're going to end up with less rally content than we want, and some rallycross. And they might, you know, the potential that they might build on that and add stages. But you know, I think the rallycross was better suited to the Dirt numbered series rather than the rally series. And I think Dirt 5 could have had the full rallycross championship in it. It could have had trucks and everything. Could have been a whole automotive adventure.
Yeah.
whereas Dirt Rally was the definitive rally game. It's not that, and so
I mean, there's a lot of fans, rallycross fans, that are excited for the rallycross portion. But as you've said before, Alan, they're very separate fans, aren't they? The rallycross from the rally fans. So I mean, rallycross on its own is probably not a big enough market to have a standalone rallycross game. So it's like it's bolted on to Dirt Rally here as a means to sell the product to both sets of fans, I guess. And it is a good selling point. But like you say, fans of the original Dirt Rally and the original vision of Codemasters, it's taken a sort of deviating path now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's, when we talked about Dirt 4, we said the game had a lack of clarity.
Yeah,
it didn't know what it wanted to be.
And we're seeing it again.
And we're seeing it again here. Yeah, I think that Dirt Rally is rally. And
not Dirt Rallycross, is it?
And I wonder if, no, it's not Dirt Rally, Rallycross. And Rallycross isn't even mentioned in the title. And I wonder, like, if you had a game design who said, right, we're going to make Dirt Rally 2, and then the marketing team sat down and said, oh, well, the trouble is that's a market of a certain size and it markets in these countries, but we really want it to be big in America or somewhere else and a few other countries, and they're not so big on rally, so we're going to have to add in something else. Let's throw Rallycross in there, and that way we can throw in jumps and some fireworks, and we can really make it, something different, and we can sell that, so we can run a different USP in Europe to America or whatever. We can change our ads and our approach, and I think that's kind of what's affected it, really. And I think you'd have been better off having a great rally game, and that would have had a really strong audience. But perhaps in the long run, once they've added DLC and they've improved it and listened to the community, I mean, Codemasters seem like they're coming around in terms of the service model of updating games, and perhaps we're going to see the game evolve into what everybody wants it to be. But it's not what everybody wants at launch, for sure. But let's see what it's going to develop into. I think there's a lot we don't know about it yet in terms of gameplay, in terms of handling, in terms of stage degradation. There's a lot still to learn from it. I think the stage we played last year, I mean, one of the first things I highlighted was the lack of people. It felt deserted. It was like it didn't feel like a real rally because there was nobody there doing most of it. And they said, "Oh, well, this is quite a deserted stage." And I thought, well, let's wait and see. Let's wait and see how it looks and feels. But certainly, I haven't been as impressed with it as I hoped to be. And I hope that when I see the final game that it's going to surprise me. But we'll wait and see. We've not got long now. When's it due for release?
So it's the end of February, isn't it? So
end of February,
about 5 weeks ish.
5 weeks. So the game will go gold any day now. And then that will be off for certification. And like you say, then we look forward to the day one patch, no doubt, and what that's going to be about, and go from there. Moving on, we've had the update to Assetto Corsa, the Zolder circuit, and Jaguar G3. I haven't played a great deal of Assetto Corsa Competizione yet. I know Ben Green has been playing it and enjoying it. I think for me, I'm just waiting until it develops further. I'd rather they're still constantly improving physics and graphics and optimization, and I'm just waiting until it improves before putting time into it.
So it's actually the 5th content release, isn't it? They've got a 6th one coming middle of February, and then after that, we expect the full version to release some probably March, maybe mid-March, something like that. So it's not long until we see the full version with all the the various teams and circuits and whatnot. So we haven't got long to wait to see how it all comes together. But at the moment, it's very much, here's a car, here's a track, here's a little snippet of some multiplayer elements, and just sort of developing it as they go. But it's good to see this model in the sense that it gives players a chance to get on early. They're not overcharging for the content. They're building up the pricing as they go along, so it seems fair enough. And it's just a way that people can support the title early. It's coming together very nicely. I like to see all the various elements added to see how it is as an overall package, but I think it has a lot of potential. Whether we'll see it on consoles, though, remains to be seen, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. It might be a next-gen thing. It might be that they just understand what they're doing on the PC for now. perhaps to see how it does. Again, it's very public development. I mean, I'm not into this whole buying half a game thing. As I say, I'll look at it at a later date. I think once it develops, and also then try it on the VR as well. And obviously there's not the VR announcement. We'll wait to see what happens on Dirt Rally. Obviously there's been a lot of chat with that, and see what it's like on Assetto Corsa. But it'd be great to see the championship working and in place. But it seems the feedback is that there's still a lot of work to be done for it to be the step up that people want, to get the handling right and everything working well on the Unreal graphics engine. And we don't really fully understand the challenges of running a graphics engine like that, but it certainly seems like there's a lot of R&D and a lot of improvements needed in terms of getting the most out of it. Kevin, what kind of news has really stuck out to you recently over the past sort of couple of weeks?
Yeah, so there's this new drifting game called Drift 19. We expect to release somewhere sort of April, May on the PC. It's been billed as the world's first realistic drifting driving simulator. So it'd be interesting to see how that comes together. But apparently they've got all the iconic drifting vehicles in there, which you can tune up and upgrade and change different parts and stuff just to sort of hone your skills. And of course they've got the iconic drifting track, which I can't really pronounce. Ebazu, is it Ebazu? I want to say Ebazu. So it's certainly has a lot of fan service there for drifting people, but it's a developer ECC game, so we're not quite sure. We don't know much about the developer, so we're not quite sure what the final product will be like. But apparently, it is a very serious sim-like experience, and it will have some compatibility with a number of racing wheels as well. We'll get more details on that as we get closer to launch, no doubt. But it will be coming to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One as well at a later date. So we just have to sort of keep an eye on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think drifting, it's amazing we don't have a proper drift game that does everything dedicated to it, isn't it? Despite, I think that we, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see what the graphics are like. And I mean, if it has the initial D-type mountain races in there, it could do really well.
Yeah.
But it depends how well they're modeled and how well it works, how challenging it is. I mean, I'm not a drifter. I mean, I've never been a drifter. Where's Ed when you need him? I think that it'll be interesting to see how well it can actually sell. But remember, drifting on a console has to be optimum with a control pad. And that's going to be interesting to see how they make it so you can drift well with a control pad. Yes, you control. It's a drifting simulator. That's where the challenge comes in with a controller, rather than the fact it's just drifting, which many games have drifting in. So yeah, we'll wait and see. Certainly not seen anything of it in animation yet working. So look forward to seeing how that develops. So we've also got GTR3 on the way. What do we know about GTR3, Kevin?
Well, not a great deal. We know it's apparently it's going to be tuned down a little bit from the from the earlier sim titles, GTR and GTR2. So it's probably a little bit more accessible of a game compared to earlier titles, which is understandable because they're going to go for the console market. So it is a move that makes sense. But it's running on the Unreal Engine 4. We know that they've got they're going to use some sound. They're going to use the very same sound guy from Racing Experience. So they're sharing technologies between the two brands. So we're going to have a really awesome audio package, hopefully. So it has a lot of potential. Whether it will satiate the needs for the real hardcore sim fans remains to be seen. But it certainly is an interesting potential game. We expect to release Q2 this year. And it's another game that just sort of brings sim racing over to the console and really cements the consoles as a viable platform for sim racing. So we don't know a great deal about it. There is some information on the site. We do have an article up there, everything we know about this game. So do have a look for that on the website. But so far we've seen very little. We've seen little teaser images here and there, but we haven't actually seen the game running yet. So they've got a lot to do and a lot to show off before launch.
Well, it's certainly been a busy month for news. I look forward to seeing how things develop. There was also the Gran Turismo developers showing off their real-time ray tracing technology a couple of weeks ago, and I think that gives a strong indication that the next generation PlayStation will feature ray tracing technology. And so that's, I mean, again, there's so much potential in terms of detail, and seeing 4K running, bells and whistles, 60 frames, full detail with ray tracing. Wow, the next gen really could be something special. And of course, Formula E Gen 2 cars are coming to R Factor 2 as well. That's going to be interesting. It's just I often find, again, going back to sim racing competitions, I have to admit, it seems like console gamers are being left out a bit in a lot of the sim racing competitions. They're primarily using stuff like R Factor, and I appreciate the fact that that's more simulation based. But again, it doesn't necessarily have the largest audience. You're only pulling from a small pot of people that play R Factor and mod games and stuff like that, which is a very small selection of gamers in the scheme of things. I think it's a bit of a shame that we're not seeing that on more formats. I mean, there is also a rumor that Formula E could come to Gran Turismo, which would open it up to a far larger market. And I think then you'd see a lot more really interesting sim racers getting involved with that. Certainly that series needs a bit more exposure. We've got Trials Rising coming very soon as well, new Trials game from Ubisoft. Don't know anything about it at the moment, other than I think there's a trailer last year, and it's being kept quite quiet. And of course, in the next couple of months, we've got Wreckfest coming as well. We'll aim to cover that when the time comes. Anti-Graviator, which we have requested some access to, but as suffice to say, we've not managed to get anywhere with the developer. And Dangerous Driving, again, we've attempted to get our hands on in the past, but it's all behind closed doors at the moment, and we'll wait and see what happens with Dangerous Driving. But certainly, it seems like it could do with a lot more development from what I've seen. It doesn't look like a near finished game yet. And then moving further into the summer, of course, we'll look at Team Sonic Racing and Crash Team Racing. So, you wait for a karting type game on console and suddenly two come along together like buses. Yeah. But that's it, I think, for now, Kevin. I think that's pretty much covered all of it for our first podcast this year. And of course, future podcasts, of course, like you say, do send your questions in. We're going to create a podcast thread on the forum, and those questions will come first. So do visit the Team VVV forum. We'll create a podcast thread there. Do let us know your questions, and those will be, if we have lots of questions, those will be the ones we go to first. But that's it from me for now, and from Kevin for now, and there'll be more from us very soon.